Giselle is going to have a baby. I'm Joseph. This is Input English. Today I have another episode in our story about Giselle and her husband Gil. The purpose of these original stories is to provide you with interesting, enjoyable, comprehensible input. Language learning doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be difficult. It can be enjoyable. In fact, if you enjoy language learning, if you enjoy comprehensible input, you will learn better and you will learn faster. This is a serialized story. The previous episodes of this story can be found in the playlist on this channel entitled Stories About the Mysterious Ben Harper. So today we join Giselle and Gil. They have been married. They have returned from their honeymoon. They have settled into their life together as a couple in Exeter, England, in Devon. Giselle has become pregnant. So at this stage, Giselle and Gil are very happy. They wanted to have a baby together. They wanted to start a family, and this is coming to pass. Along with the excitement of having the baby came some fear. In the late 1800s, childbirth was not without its risks, and so it often was a mixture of joy and fear. Giselle and Gil didn't dwell upon their fear. They didn't talk about it very much at all. You could say they suffered in silence. They worried privately. They didn't want to burden their partner. They didn't want to burden their spouse with their worries. So they kept their worries to themselves. As the pregnancy progressed, Giselle's abdomen became rather large. Giselle is a very petite woman, and so as her abdomen enlarged from this pregnancy, it seemed disproportional. It seemed too much for her size. Giselle would be attended by a midwife for the delivery. The midwife visited her and commented on how large the abdomen was getting. The midwife thought to herself that perhaps they were off on their dates and that perhaps this pregnancy had been going on longer than was suspected. As the abdomen became bigger and bigger, the fears grew because the time of delivery was a time of risk. And they knew that a small woman and a big baby could be a problem. In the late 1800s, cesarean section was considered a last resort. It was a salvage procedure, and it could be associated with the mother's death. The midwife would be assisted by her assistant. The midwife is training another woman to become a midwife. This midwife in training would be helping at the time of the delivery. The midwife told Gil and Giselle what supplies to acquire so that they would be prepared for the delivery. They weren't certain when it would occur, so they wanted to be prepared well in advance. At that time, in the late 1800s, midwives did not wear rubber gloves. Rubber gloves had come into use in the operating room, but they had not yet been adapted for use in childbirth. A good midwife in that era would wash her hands a lot. It was well known that postpartum infection was a major cause of death of women after childbirth. So a good midwife was given to washing her hands a lot. The midwife had speculated when labor would begin based on the dates, but this was always a little bit of guesswork. She was not certain when it would occur. She just gave an estimate. That estimated date came and went, and it was actually about 3 weeks later that Giselle went into labor. When a woman goes into labor for the first child, for the first birth, that process of labor, delivering the first child, usually takes about 24 hours. That has not changed much with modern technology. Labor usually takes about 24 hours for the first baby. Giselle went into labor, and initially it wasn't too bad. Later, it became more intense, and then it became very protracted. Based on the number of hours she had been in labor, the midwife had expectations of when this baby would be born. That expected time came and went. The baby did not come on the schedule that existed in the mind of the midwife. After about 27 hours of labor, the baby was born. During the last few months of pregnancy, Gil and Giselle had talked about what names they would apply to their new offspring. Of course, they didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl. In England, in the late 1800s, there was a naming convention. This is not a hard rule that had to be followed, but it was a tradition that was well known. The first male child was typically named after his father. Now, in the case of Gil, his first name is Jacob. And Gil did not like his first name. He didn't use it, and he didn't want to name his son Jacob. Now, he could have named his son Gilbert, but he came up with a different idea. He suggested to Giselle that if the baby is a boy, they should name it after her father, Benjamin. She thought that was a wonderful idea, so they had selected their name for their baby in the event that the baby is a boy. During the pregnancy, Gil was hoping for a boy. However, during the pregnancy, Giselle was hoping for a girl. She had given a lot of thought to what name she would give her daughter, if she has a daughter, and she decided upon the name Helena. She told this to Gil, and he accepted it without any discussion. It would be fine. Helena is a lovely name. When the baby was born, it was a boy. As soon as the baby was born, the midwife noticed that this was a small baby. Not so small that she worried that the baby would not survive. It wasn't tiny, but this little infant boy, this newborn boy, was smaller than expected. And it puzzled her because Giselle's abdomen had been so big and this baby seemed so small, it just didn't make sense. This caused the midwife to worry not that the baby wouldn't survive, but that the baby might be sickly. It might be a sickly child. One of the practical issues when delivering babies is that they are very slippery. It would be easy to drop a newborn baby because they're so slippery. This midwife was well aware of this, so she had several small, soft cotton blankets to swaddle the child. That had two big benefits. One, it prevented the child from getting a chill. You don't want the child to get cold. It also made it much easier to handle this newborn without dropping it. Once the baby was born, they had to deal with the umbilical cord, but there's no hurry to do this. In that time, in the late 1800s, midwives were taught to take their time and not be in a big hurry to cut the cord. They were taught to let the cord stop pulsating. Now, in the 21st century, we know that they were on the right track. Letting some time pass after the birth allows the baby to acquire significant amounts of blood volume from the placenta. Also, the blood from the placenta has a lot of stem cells in it. And so there are some very good biological reasons to not be in a hurry to divide the cord. Somehow, the midwives in the late 1800s in Devon knew that. After about 2 minutes, she tied the cord and cut it. She passed the baby to her assistant who held it, and then she turned her attention to the next task, which would be delivering the placenta, the afterbirth. She noticed that Giselle was not hemorrhaging, so there was no hurry, there was no emergency. She just needed to deliver the afterbirth. When she turned her attention to that task, what she noticed was that another baby's head was emerging from the birth canal. There was a second baby. So she responded as a professional. She delivered the second baby. To herself, she wondered perhaps there would be a third, but there wasn't. As she was delivering the second baby, which was also a boy, she began to understand why the first child was a little smaller than expected, because twins are usually a little smaller. And then she realized that also explained the longer labor, because labor is usually longer with twins. It all made sense to her. Now, she didn't tell anybody this. She was just thinking this while she was going about the task of delivering the second baby. Eventually, the second umbilical cord was divided, the placenta was delivered, and then the cleanup was undertaken. She washed her hands carefully, and after everything was satisfactory, the midwife went out of the room to talk to Gil, to tell him the good news that he was a father of 2 healthy boys. She would also reassure him that Giselle had come through the delivery very nicely. Giselle's response to having 2 baby boys was as expected. She had tears of joy. She only wanted an intact family. She wanted a healthy baby, and instead she got 2 lovely baby boys. Her mind was also racing at this time. They had decided that the first baby would be called Benjamin. That decision was already made. But what should they call the second boy? Perhaps Gilbert. Perhaps not. A name sprang to mind, and she didn't really know where it came from, but she decided to herself, without talking to anyone, that the second baby should be called Harper. She just liked the name. She had heard it. She didn't know anybody named Harper, but she just liked the name. And so she decided that she would propose that as the name for the second baby boy. When Gil and Giselle were able to talk about the names together after the delivery and after her early recovery, she suggested the name and they agreed. The first boy would be Benjamin and the second boy would be Harper. During Giselle's entire pregnancy, Gil was obsessed with trying to control his telekinesis powers. He was trying to figure out how to get some minimal control over this telekinesis. His efforts were not a complete failure, but he did not get good volitional control over that power. Not yet. Also, during this period, during Giselle's pregnancy, Gil started working as a teacher, as a professor at the Exeter School of Science. He taught mathematics. In the late 1800s, mathematics was mostly taught as applied mathematics. It was taught with real-world applications and purposes, and the field of pure mathematics had not really developed widely. Even in the big universities like Cambridge, the mathematics as taught tended to be more applied math rather than pure math. During this time in the late 1800s, that was starting to change. When Gil taught classes in mathematics at the School of Science in Exeter, he saw that his students basically fell into two camps. He noticed that nearly half the students were completely lost. They had no idea what he was talking about, and they struggled with the math, even though what he was teaching was fairly simple. The other group of students was the group that intrigued Gil. These were the students who were hungry, not only for the basic math that he was teaching, but hungry for more advanced mathematical concepts. Their questions sometimes tested Gil's knowledge. Initially, when they asked questions for which he had no ready answer, it made him nervous. It made him anxious. After all, he was the teacher. He should know this. But over the weeks and months, as this process continued, he realized that these questions for which he had no answers would be the stimulus for him to learn higher and higher mathematics. He found himself poring over mathematics books. He had a good resource. The library in Exeter was excellent and had a lot of textbooks that he could use to improve his own knowledge. He spent a lot of time studying advanced mathematics. After the two boys were delivered, Giselle and the two boys recovered very nicely. No complications were sustained, and soon Giselle was up and about. Gil was very attentive to her needs. He took care of a lot of the chores, and they had some help in the household. This was a very happy time for this young couple. Soon the boys were gaining weight and showing signs of being robust, healthy young babies. In the next episode, we're going to learn about what happened when Gil realized that he needed to put even more effort into his studies of mathematics so that he would be a more effective teacher. He also is trying to figure out how to get some help controlling his telekinesis without telling anybody that he has telekinesis. Based on a conversation he had, he developed an idea, and we're going to explore how that idea unfolded. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.